the Jackson County Republican chair, Doug Breidenthal, is in studio. What a transition. What an introduction, Doug. How the heck?
Good morning. How you doing today, Bill?
I'm doing fine. So you were just there at the Oregon Conservative Policy Summit for the whole 2 days.
Yes, sir.
What have you learned?
Unparalleled amounts of information came out of that summit. It was just a wonderful time.
Is there anything we can talk about here, or do you have to have a secret handshake? I mean, what?
A secret handshake? Well, you know, if you came, we'd be able to give you the information.
Well, I was there. I was there in the beginning, but then I had to work my day job, you know?
You know, I brought a lot of information for your listeners, and I hope they're ready to hear what came out of that summit. The leaders from across the state, from all the conservative PACs, helped form this legislative agenda, and we're going to be releasing it here shortly. But I wanted to give you guys a little sneak preview of it.
Okay, what are some of the highlights?
You know, land use seemed to be one of the big key items. 10 planks came out of that program, out of that committee itself. And it was really nice to see how they wanted localized control. Everybody across the state was looking at finding ways to localize the control on land use, bringing it back to the county level.
And, of course, localizing land control doesn't hurt the Willamette Valley, Havana on the Willamette, you know, as the case might be. if they want to completely lock everything up, as they have been doing, that's perfectly okay. Works for them. They're very densely populated and all the rest of it. That's fine. The problem, though, is that these same individuals have wanted to force the same rules on very undense areas, such as Eastern Oregon, parts of Southern Oregon, too, right?
Extremely dense areas want to take it, create their rules to make it work for the rest of the state. Mm-hmm. You're right on with the program. We're done listening to the Portland, Oregon, as we use land use in the state of Oregon, and it's very evident in the way it came out in these new legislative agendas.
So what are some of the proposals?
Well, basically, some of the things that they want to do is legislative jurisdiction of the state and federal lands for purposes of management, including predation. Due to lack of forest management on the federal lands, they want to make sure that the management of these lands are done at the local level and at the state level, which is a really nice thing.
So is this a policy which could be actually implemented in the GOP platform?
Yeah, I believe it can.
That's what's coming up next, right?
You know, September 9th, I'll be taking this agenda, and I'll be hand-carrying it to Bend to the platform convention, which I'm co-chairing with Chairman Alley. And I will be taking this agenda, and I will be presenting it for consideration for adoption by the GOP for the state of Oregon.
So more local land use control, fine with that. What else?
One of the other things I thought was really nice that as we know that the governor basically creates all the administrative rules. It's an executive branch concept of making law. A legislator doesn't have a chance to set these rules or write these rules. They make the program.
So we have a rule for DEQ or LCDC or whatever. It basically comes through Governor Kitzhofer's office. Right?
Exactly. Well, these rules, what they're looking at is creating a sunset clause for the OARs and giving the legislator the ability to say, okay, Governor, you've had your chance. You wrote your rule. It's been 5 years. Let's see how the rule's doing. Do we want to make this a law for the rest of our lives?
I see. So there's kind of a time limit that you're going to be subject to, so what could be a bad rule. So a rule would then have to be justified and then turned into law. Is that kind of what I'm hearing here?
That's exactly what we're saying.
All right. So the idea that you would be living under the bureaucratic tyranny would be pretty much coming to an end. You'd only have a potential maximum of 5 years.
Exactly. And they didn't set a time limit on this particular concept. That's something that they'd have to work out.
Oh.
So the 5-year concept was just something that I was
something that they kicked around
as an example.
All right.
So, but setting that sunset clause on OARs is just a really nice way to say, hey, look, this is something that isn't working. We need to make it go away. Or this is something that's great. Let's make it law.
Let's just make it law, and this way the legislative bodies then are being accountable rather than just ceding control to the executive.
Accountable and productive.
I'm okay with that. All right. Sounds pretty good. What else?
Legislative coordination plans for perpetual timber production. Imagine getting back into the woods.
Well, isn't this something we've been talking about for years now?
It is. But it's putting it back into the legislators' hands to direct ODF to create a coordination plan built around perpetual timber production according to the principle of sustainable yield.
So when I'm hearing coordination plan, is that using that federal definition of coordination where all of the laws
under
are written
U.S.
by
code.
Congress? U.S. code? Excellent. All right, that's a big change. That's a big change. There's been a big battle trying to get this discussed at the state level.
Yeah, it's there. We're trying to look at it at that aspect now.
So far so good.
That's the highlights of the natural resources. I don't want to get too deep into one particular subject because we had 5 different groups and committees that met in this area to include economic vitalization, state fiscal reform, and education reform. So there's a lot of really neat stuff that came out of this.
I'd like to focus on, given the fact we're all going back to school for the most part next week, what about education reform?
We can go there.
Imagine that Connections Academy folks and such were chatting this up.
You know, a lot of what I noticed...
Matt Wingard?
Matt was, Representative Wingard was there, and he did participate in the committee, along with Rob Kramer coming out of the Transformation Project up out of Salem. So I was really pleased to see that. And he actually chaired the committee.
Any conclusions we can draw from what happened?
You know, a lot of it was tied into charter schools and giving charter schools and alternative schools the means to be able to do their job.
What is preventing them from doing their job right now?
Well, right now, what happens is the parent school districts usually retain 20% of the charter school's funding. So they give the money for the charter school, and 20% of that money is held back into the main corporation or the main school district.
So if you have a charter school here in Medford, as an example, Medford 549C gets 20%, even though most of the education then is going on through the charter.
Right. All the education is going on through the charter.
Through the charter.
There are school bus systems and stuff like that that go on with the services. However, if you look at Lone Pine or any other education programs that we have into the Medford school system, they only hold back 2% of what would go back to that school, where 20% is actually being held back by for the charter schools. So that was one of the big main focus items, is looking at ways to get the exact same funding for those charter schools as a normal public school.
So it would put them on an equal financial footing.
Exactly.
All right.
One of the other things that was really a hot topic that I thought was really productive is being able to put a scholarship tax credit together. Creating a scholarship programs where businesses can get a tax credit, a direct tax credit, for putting money into a scholarship program for students. This takes and gives the citizen concept back into the program, saying citizens are responsible for the education of the children in the community, not necessarily the government. Okay. And we all know that every time the government dictates education, they force agendas.
Curriculum, all the rest of it.
Yeah. So if we take that citizen concept and say the citizens are responsible for those education of the children, let's give them a tax credit for the dollars they put into it.
What about tuition tax credit for people educating their children in general? Is there any conversation about that?
There was a lot of conversation
because that's a way that you could actually you get to the point where I think it's immoral that someone could be forced to go into you either have to go into a public school, or you have to be wealthy enough to be able to educate your child through a private education system or something else. But then you're also still forced to support the education system that you don't believe is morally helpful or educationally helpful for your child.
Exactly. In this particular concept, that can be utilized here. If you go to a private school and there's a scholarship program that school would be eligible for, then you would get a direct tax credit for that particular scholarship. Here's an example. We'd set up different scholarship programs across the state. They give out the scholarships. AT&T wants to donate money into this program. They get a direct tax credit for the state of Oregon. That money goes into the pool. They get to dole out the scholarships. Where those scholarships are actually utilized, it could be either a private school. It doesn't really matter.
Okay. Doug Breidenthal here, Jackson County Republican Party Chair. Hey, Clegg, how are you doing this morning? A quick question on education before we move on to some of the other planks here.
Not so much a question. I'd like to make a quick little statement. My daughter lives in Colorado, southern Denver. The school district at the end of June offered her $4,750 for each of my 2 grandsons to go to a private school. She was all excited about it because I think it was like she had to add another $2,250 or something. And she was really excited about it. And then enrolled them, everything. But at the latter part of July, the ACLU got an injunction against it. And so she had to go back. She she couldn't afford the private school, but so she had to go back put them back into the public school. Everybody was a winner. The reason being is $4,750 went to my daughter, or went to the private school. $2,250 stayed in the district for not educating any kids. It's got to stay in the district. And that was about $1,200 less than what the state would have given the school district to educate the kids, my grandkids.
So in other words, you kind of subsidize the failure just to kind of get them off your back temporarily? Yeah. Is that a good way of putting it? I guess
something like that.
Okay, but the ACLU fought it. I am appalled. Well, actually, I'm surprised. I'm surprised they did that. Clyde, thanks for bringing that up. That's an interesting story.
Wow.
Yeah. So, boy, we don't have a lot of time here left, so we better start jumping through the rest of these deals.
Well, yeah, that'd be great.
Doug Breidenthal here once again, chairman in Jackson County Republican Party here.
You know, one of the other things that we're looking at is the election process, election law reform. We all understand what happens with the big buses, and they move all the people around the state, and all of a sudden, you know, the whole thing shifts at the last second when we talk about ballots. Oregon's got some real controversial issues.
Well, you want to get rid of the vote by mail?
Well, actually, one of the criteria for this whole program is we basically said, be cognitive of the fact that we're putting stuff together that's actually may make it into the legislative session and will become law.
Okay.
So don't come up with these outlandish stuff. Think clearly, act decisively, and create a real document. So we look at all these different programs, and they actually they looked at deals that were actually capable of making a real difference in the program. Increased penalties for organized election fraud.
Do we not have really high penalties right now?
No, $25, $30. Who cares if you get busted?
Oh,
I mean, I can hire a guy for $100 a day, have him go out there commit election fraud. He's going to get fined $30. He still makes $75 for the day. Who cares? I mean, he's already a criminal.
What about economic development? I mean, that's just one for our election here. Economic development, jobs. I know it's on my mind.
I was trying to save that one for last.
Oh, okay.
It's so important. The economic side of it is we've had just an incredible group of people that helped put this together, by the way, from across the state. And regulation compliance reforms was one of the main issues. And they looked at a lot of the fee-based taxation, which is essentially taxation when you look at fees. Anybody who believes different ought to reconsider their position. But needless to say, new and existing regulations issued in response to legislation shall be supported by measurable and repeatable standards. And that's one of the things that they're looking at that they thought was the most important plank. Fees and taxation, of course, you know, that was number 2, get rid of as much as they can. And I have to say, even though we did give them some standards, they did come up with repeal 66 and 67.
They did.
Imagine
that.
Wow. It was one of the main things. And frankly, they said this is the biggest job killer in the state of Oregon. It is just hurting them dramatically, more than people even realize.
So even if you lose money, you're still going to be paying taxes on a money losing business.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you're taxed on the gross, not the net.
Okay. And let's see, anything else you want to touch on here?
You know, one of the other things I thought was really neat that they talked about was the capital investment stimulus. And it's basically a way to encourage capital investment retention with the state of Oregon, and the capital gains tax levied on the sale of businesses, assets, and farm properties being deferred for the portion of the said proceeds, which are reinvested in Oregon business within 3 years.
So if you sell an Oregon business, you reinvest it in another Oregon business, you're not going to pay the cap gains.
That's the concept.
That's reasonable.
It keeps jobs in the state of Oregon.
Rather than yet another corporation being set up in, well, I don't know, Nevada.
Well, what happens is people die, people move on, they want to sell their business. It's cheaper to do business elsewhere, so they move the business out, and they're profitable in Nevada where there's no taxation.
All right, very good. And finally, we'll wrap this up with the straw poll on the presidential and vice presidential candidates. This is interesting. I'm just going to point out what stands out for me at first. How low Mitt Romney. I mean, Mitt Romney, we're told, is the nationwide leader right now.
Yeah, it's amazing how the state of Oregon leadership really feels.
I'm looking here. One for president. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mitt Romney is tied for fourth place with Representative Ron Paul, 3 votes apiece. So not a lot of Ron Paul fans in the GOP here. Representative Michelle Bachmann, number 3, with 6. Herman Cain ended up getting 9. And Perry, number 1 at 33.
That's a pretty bold statement.
Are they just falling in love with the new guy?
Well, I don't even know if it's, you know what's interesting also is
he hasn't even been in a debate yet.
He hasn't, and in true grassroots spirit, he was a write-in.
That's true.
Perry was the write-in on this straw poll.
Okay. So let's take a look at and by the way, Tim Pawlenty, Newt Gingrich way there at the back. Rick Santorum got an extra vote. Marco Rubio. Don't even get me started for the reasons why we just talked about there. And so Mitt Romney got 1 more vote than Marco Rubio. Okay. All right. Straw poll for the vice president here. Michelle Bachmann, number 1. 11 votes. Tied with Marco Rubio. Uh-oh. Come on, guys. Read your Constitution. Herman Cain, second place at 6 votes. Rick Santorum also at 6 votes, so they tied for second. Christie and Newt Gingrich, fourth place. Representative Ron Paul and Palin tie. Actually, we had a big tie for fifth place. Ron Paul, Palin, Mitt Romney, and Paul Ryan, who's not even running, right? And Representative Thaddeus M. McCotter? Is that who that is? I don't know.
There was some.
And Mitch Daniels, for all the fact that, the media loves him, 1 vote. That's all he got. He didn't even make it in the presidential poll, did he? No, he didn't.
Never even made it.
All right, that's the latest from the Conservative Summit. And we appreciate you coming in here, Doug. We'll have you back on, okay? You going to release this information in a document, the basic, what happened there?
What we're going to be doing is, as this gets compiled into a formal document, we're going to be presenting it to the House and into the Senate, and they're going to be taking this for consideration for their caucuses, for putting their agendas together here next month.
All right, very good. Doug Breidenthal, Jackson County Republican Party Chairman, thanks for coming in.